Welcome to
Bean Stuff.
Today we are talking about, well actually this is our fourth in the series of cupping, but we are talking specifically about body.
Yes, an important term that you may not know, but you taste every time you put your coffee to your lips.
Well, and it's such an important piece of the way coffee feels, the way it tastes, the way it affects you. So important so that we were actually drinking a cup of coffee, one made with a paper filter and one with a metal filter to test the difference, just because we were curious.
We were curious. It's a little different than normal because we actually, for both processes, we used a method, I should say. We used the AeroPress, and we have a paper and we have a cone, Kone, and we want to see, because we know later on we're going to talk about paper and metal make a difference to your body of your coffee.
Yeah, so I guess to start things off with, we will want to define what body is. Mm-hmm. And I think you were telling me that body is one of the four things that when you're tasting that are kind of like the big ticket items that you're going to actually be tasting. Is that correct?
That's right. I'm getting a bit loud there, aren't I? Sorry. It's typically, you taste a lot of things when you drink a cup of coffee, and hopefully it's good.
Right.
But four main things that tend to stand out when you drink a coffee and you actually think about your coffee. Body would be one of them. Mm-hmm. Then you've got the acidity. Is it bright? Is it not? Which we're going to talk about probably another podcast actually. And the flavors, which we've already talked a lot about. And
and the flavor side, I mean, our last episode talked a lot about flavor.
That's right. And we're not going to go on that so much. But the last one is aftertaste. What happens once you've swallowed the coffee? What's happening there? So those are the four things, and body is one of those.
I'm not sure. Is it you? Maybe it's you. But there's always, I'm thinking it's you. Mm-hmm. But for years, drinking coffee and stuff, every once in a while there'd be a little bit of a burp after
yes,
coffee is consumed.
It's more my wife. She would. That was a sign of a good cup of coffee when. But
it's a coffee burp. Yeah. I'm not sure if that's exactly aftertaste, but it's after the fact.
No, that would definitely be more aftertaste. Yeah.
So, what is body? So we've talked about, the fact that it is an important piece of what you're cupping. It's an important piece of what we're tasting. But can we kind of break down coffee or body a little bit more? Yeah,
which is what we intend to do this particular podcast. The body, it's of the SCA form. It has 10 different areas you can look at attributes of coffee. Right. One of them is body. There's a box in there for body, and that gives you 10 points. So this is 10% of everything you say about a cup of coffee. 10% of it they're saying is body, and we need to talk about that.
It's a big portion of the actual process of grading it, even on a cup. Like you said, it's 10% on a coffee form. And I think we've linked that form in the past, but we'll link it again so you can kind of see the breakdown of that there.
And if you don't use the SCA one, most forms will do something about body because it is such a major component to the coffee itself.
Well, and how is it scored on that sheet? Is it intensity, or what's the kind of like the scale that it lays on?
Yeah, two things really, particularly the quality of the body. Is it a good body, or is it a body you go, whoa, that is not even here, and it may be there, but it's not doing anything to my tongue at all, the tactile feel of it. But there's another part to it that it's a vertical scale on that form, and it starts off thin and goes up to heavy. And some coffees are thin and some are heavy. So that form, it will force you to put a line in there somewhere. And usually, if it's a specialty coffee, it's going to be a line between 6 and 10. And 10 being like, this is the best tasting body coffee. Not the flavor here. I'm
right.
The
a
body
coffee
of
could
the
have
coffee.
really bad flavor, but have good body.
Exactly, or vice versa.
I think that's where that subjective, objective part comes in pretty clearly too, because you have to be able to sit there and say this has a good body, but I hate the way it tastes, or vice versa. You're not assessing just the flavor; you're actually assessing different components of that coffee. And you wrote something here that I liked, and I think it ties back to kind of our we had an episode on extraction, and I think that kind of actually ties in, as you and I were talking about this episode before recording it. There's a lot of tie-ins to extraction in the body that I didn't ever make before. So I think it's kind of an interesting piece. But this is the quote. Was it from you?
I've so long since I've written this down. This one, I look back at my notes, and I didn't have anyone with it. So I'm assuming I may have said something like this.
This is a Paulism.
Oh well, who knows?
Maybe. If not, we're sorry.
A suspension of small particles dispersed in another substance,
which is a little airy-fairy. It's not it doesn't really help clarify too much immediately. But when you start thinking about it, there are more particles or substances in suspension in the hot water that we've used to brew our coffee.
And body is very much those particles that are insoluble, and those that float around in there, and that's going to give you a tactile feel on your tongue. And this is now we're moving into what body is.
Well, and I think the biggest thing that I've heard you say, and I've thought about it before as well, is milk and water. I think that those differentiate. You think about milk. How many more things does milk have in it as opposed to water? It's got fat, it's got sugar, it's got all these different pieces there. So there's not to say that that's the only reason we get that, but there is a lot more substance in suspension in the
when we're cupping. That's a typical thing. When I'm leading a cupping, I will actually get people to have some water and they put it in their mouth. They get their tongue involved, and that's really what you're doing. This whole podcast is about getting your tongue involved in this, and the top of the roof of your mouth as well.
Well, it's very much like the one where we went through kind of like the actual physical practice of it. It's like that slurping. You want to get it everywhere. So using your tongue to kind of swish it around in your mouth.
It swishes it around, but more importantly, it weighs the coffee because these particles have weight to them.
Right.
If it doesn't have so many particles, it won't have so much weight. And so you're going to get your tongue involved in water, and you just get your tongue, and this is not going to, if you see this, even then it's not going to be that good, but just the tongue's going to go, and you're just getting your tongue up and down like a scale.
I think of it this way.
Yeah.
Imagine walking like normal.
Yes.
And then imagine walking in a pool. How much harder is it to walk in a pool?
It's not a bad idea.
It's a lot harder. So it's like
you'll notice it.
If you maneuver your tongue while you have just water in your mouth, think about how that feels. And then if you put milk or coffee, compare it to that. Yes. How does that feel?
Which is when you spit the coffee out, the water out at this stage, and your tongue just goes so fast. It's like, wow, I can
it's
just
like a
move
fish in water.
It's like a fish in water. But then you put yourself with gumboots on in water, if that's the illustration we're going with here, and you put the milk in, and suddenly there's this viscosity, they call it. It's just thick, and your tongue slows down, and it feels the weight of the coffee. And now we're moving towards the body, or the weight, the tactile feel of the coffee.
And it's not actually, well, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not the texture. So it's not like, is it sticky? Is it sharp? It's the actual weight of that. So it's like, it's not like having peanut butter in your mouth where it gets kind of sticky, but also has a lot of body to it.
It's I would say it's got a little bit of that, because in body, you're going to talk about smooth, has a smooth body. And so it's heavy, but it floats around, your tongue goes around very easily. Whereas if you had peanut butter in your mouth, it goes not around so easily. So you're sort of right there. So there's that tactile, but that smooth, is it a smooth body or not?
Yeah.
It's going to be different.
Yeah. No,
style
it is.
Body.
It is. Well, and I think kind of the whole, what we're talking about at the moment is mouth feel.
Mouth feel. Yep.
And I think that's, I don't know, for me, that's the easiest way to think about it is, what is body? Well, it's mouth feel. What does it feel like in your mouth? Not what does it taste like? Yeah. And I think that's a hard thing to get away from when I'm cupping coffee, or, anything we do a lot of times is, what does it taste like? We don't, it's not quite the texture, but it's the weight. It is really like a scale in your mouth. That's right. And that texture and the flavor play into the body as well. So it sort of comes in, your brain starts thinking about all those and putting all those things together. And suddenly you're getting a score between 6 and 10. 10 being, this is the best quality body I've ever had, and a 6. And you sort of start thinking, and as you have the next one from another country, or wherever it may be, you realize this is like water and milk. This is like water and honey. It's got a much bigger body on it than the last one had. And then you add that, eventually to the rest of what you're cupping with, and the rest of how you're tasting it, and it really does change, the way that you taste or have the feel of a coffee. Like if you have a coffee that's got lots of chocolatey notes and lots of things like that, it's not very bright, but it's got a lot of body. Sometimes that makes sense. But if you have, I guess it all depends on what you're looking for. But you could have a really bright coffee with a lot of body, and it might not be what you're looking for. So it's a really important piece to consider when you're tasting the coffee.
It is. And as you're saying, that's 10% of the 100% score if you're going to score a coffee, which is not it's got its ins and outs, good and bad, whatever. But
right.
Objectively, you're trying to say this one gets a big score body and a little score for acidity. The end score is going to be balanced in terms of it's not a bad coffee because it had a high body, it had a low, and you may like that, you may not, but there's the score.
Well, and what do you like, Dad, with coffee? Do you like it to have a higher body, or does it depend on the coffee, or is it too vague of a question?
I'm very fortunate to have had so many coffees. I've learned, and you do learn to appreciate some things. I didn't start off liking body so much. Then I had a Sumatra or a Sulawesi and suddenly realized, whoa, the taste was very different. I had to get used to that taste first, but the body was out of this world. And I'm going, I like this. I'm going to have this again. And what happened as I had more for the body, I actually started to appreciate the flavor, the taste of the coffee as well.
And I think that is a huge part of it, is it's kind of like you said, with the different coffees, you had different experiences with it. Body is not going to make a bad coffee a good coffee.
Exactly.
It's a piece of it and it's important, but it's not all of it.
Recently I had I think it was an Ethiopian I had that it had a high body and a high acidity, and there's balance, and there's aroma and all these different fragrance, and a lot of different aftertaste you could look at, but just body and acidity, this had high in both of those. So therefore got a very high score at the end because the balance was really good between the two, and therefore ended up with a really high score, and wow, that's a good coffee.
Yeah, there you go. So let's dig into a little bit more of the science of body here, more the why, the how, the why is it there kind of a thing.
Yeah. Which you do need to think about that, because why does some coffee have it and some doesn't?
Well, and how can you get more out of a coffee that
another good question.
You might cup something and you say, oh man, this would be so good if it had a little bit more body to it. How do we extract it? Can we extract it? That kind of a thing. We're saying the word extract a lot. Again, if you have questions about extraction, we have another episode that talks about that, which is, it ties in fairly well.
And you start realizing these things all do come together as such.
They're all in the same cup.
Exactly. And the extraction, that's an important part of this, as you start giving time and temperature to the coffee, put the grounds in, and you put the water in, and you put the time in there. If we've talked about before, if you go too long, it may over extract. If you don't do long enough, it may under extract. If the ground's too coarse, too fine, extraction's going to be part of that. But part of the extraction is it's really dividing up the solubles and the insolubles. This is a science course here now. That's right. And soluble is it dissolves in water basically. Insolubles, it doesn't. The particle's still there, and the water doesn't get into it, and it can't extract any flavour out of that particular particle as such.
Right. I think of it like, one way I just thought of this, but is if you think about having water, put a bunch of salt in it, stir it up, salt dissolves. Put a bunch of eggshells in there, stir it up.
Insoluble.
They are going to stay. And that's going to change the way it feels. It's going to change the literal actual weight of the coffee itself. And so those pieces are going to have a pretty large effect.
Yeah, you don't really want to drink that, of course, because...
No, we're not recommending you put eggshells in your coffee.
This could be new coffee. Eggshell coffee.
It's like white coffee, but egg.
Well, I tasted these two coffees I had in front of me. And actually, the flavour is different.
Yeah, very different.
One being a more metal style, one being the paper style. But I'm liking them both. The flavour's different, but the body is actually fairly similar for an AeroPress. I don't know if it's just a smaller paper filter it's going through, because we're going to look at shortly that a paper filter tends to take out more oils than a metal filter.
Yeah. No, I think there's definitely a difference. It's interesting.
And the tweaking we're getting into now, changing the coffee, I need to say also that the seed comes with everything in it that it's ever going to have, basically.
It's got all the tools there.
Exactly. And you can bring out certain bits and other bits, but you can't, if it doesn't have body, then you're not going to be able to tweak really much at all. But it has a little bit or half of, there's enough in there you can tweak out to accentuate that part of the coffee.
Right. It's like a music or a song. You on your stereo in the car, you can turn up the bass in a song to the middle with the treble, turn them down. But if a song doesn't have any low end or any bass to it, you can crank it, but it's not going to do anything.
That's right.
So it really does have to be there. You can't break you can't add something that's not already existent in the coffee.
And if it is there, what we're doing with the SCA cupping form, what we're doing here is if there is body, if there is acidity, if there's acid, all those things are there. Really, we're now looking at, if you're going to go for the musical analogy, you're looking at the different notes and you say, I want to pull out all the middle C's.
Yeah.
Or perhaps the bass notes, perhaps the body is a lower note.
Yeah.
And you're just now trying to forget about the D's, all the other notes in the piano.
Yeah.
And you're just wanting to bring out the C's, let's say, or the lower C if you want to go that deep. And you're trying to filter out and say, I can't hear the other notes. All I'm listening to is for C's. Da, 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 da. Oh, there it is there. Hear it.
You're looking for balance within that. If you have a song that's just all low end, you're gonna get a song or a final product that's way out of balance.
Exactly.
Whereas if you even it out, if you have a song that's got balance through, so it's that's looking for that balance within that body, it's gonna present you with a more a more defined cup, as far as like you can differentiate between flavors and different things. It's not going to be overpowered by one aspect.
Yes. And the balance too comes in. All the other notes are just as important, but at this point we're just looking at the C. But you need B and D and E. You need all those notes as well to give it a balance, rather than if it is you're saying. So
yeah,
they're all important, but we're just focusing right now on body.
Yeah. And again, those insolubles are things that don't dissolve in the hot water or the coffee, or even cold brew, are going to be the oils. They're going to be the actual solid parts of the bean. There's going to be pieces that make it through the filter, or depending on what filter you use, they may not, but that are all going to add or change the way that feels there.
And typically, if you're going to start off in this whole looking at body coffees and trying to focus on that. This is a huge generalization, because coffee has moved on in terms of how you can get more body on the farm as well when you're growing coffee. Although genetically it's there or it's not. And particularly Indonesian coffees, the Sumatra, the Sulawesi, they are known to have a lot of body. Then you've got those with less body, but they've got other attributes that are good, like Colombia and Mexico are known not to have as much body. But that's what used to be known, and things change though as time goes on, and they try different methods on the farm.
Right.
It can change that up a little bit.
Well, and I think that's important. An important thing to note is that's where blending comes in as well. Unless if you're doing single origin, obviously, you're going to be looking for a balance in your coffee. But if you, let's say you have a Mexican coffee that doesn't have the body you're looking for this season, you might add in a Sumatra or taste different things. And that's where that cupping comes in important, because you learn to differentiate between the coffees, and you can say, okay, this one actually, I know this one has a lot of body to it, and I know this one doesn't. I'm going to try adding them and then see what the flavor, what it does to that. Do they complement each other?
That's really good, Reed, because when we're making a blend, and that's one of the advantages of a blend, the proportions you can change as coffee changes over time. Yeah. And but the good thing about that with a blended coffee is you can keep the integrity of that flavor going throughout. Whereas you've got just one coffee, and if that starts dying off in some ways, it's died off, you've got to get a new coffee. But with a blend, you can add the Sumatra if it's not giving as much body as you want. Well, let's go to some of its neighbors, and let's go to Papua New Guinea and see what they've got there that will bring body but not take over the flavor. And now you're in the whole realm of making a blend of coffee.
It's a whole new episode there, blending.
Oh, mate.
So we've got, those are two examples of some coffees that generically have different profiles for body there. I guess, is there any particular guide that we can go with for what coffees may be prone to more body other than just those two, or is it or different styles of coffee? True. Even
I mean, you could look at it in more detail, and I know, and I've tasted Guatemalans that have some thick body, some El Salvadors that have some thick body. Yeah. And that's a generalization as well. You need to cup these coffees and see if this particular one in this particular year of this one has it.
Right.
And but then I've tasted some wonderful geisha, Ethiopian, or from Panama, and they're very delicate. When I say delicate, they don't have that body fat.
They have a different complexity to it.
Yep, and therefore, and they're almost tea-like. When I say tea-like, tea is quite low in body.
Well, you think about it, tea doesn't typically have a lot of body until we add milk in it.
Exactly. Yep.
So its extraction is a little bit different.
Yep.
The other thing that can change or manipulate the body that we're getting would be the process or the way the coffee is processed.
Now we're back on the farm now, and you're right.
Yeah.
So as I say, you've got the coffee, the green bean. It's been taken off the tree. The cherry's been taken off, and it's going through a process. And there's different processes, which we'll have to do a podcast on processes.
It's like every episode we figure out what we're going to do next.
Yeah, that's right. There you go. I'm going to keep you coming back for more.
Yeah.
But different processes of how that coffee goes from the seed on the tree all the way through getting onto a boat to come to Europe, to New Zealand, to Australia, to America here. Yeah. It's going to go through a different process. And that process will tweak again the body of the coffee.
Right.
I'm just going to talk about three major processes, and there's more to it than that.
What are the three?
First one is washed.
Okay.
It's washed, wet, they call it. And there's water, a lot of water involved. A lot of Guatemalans go this way, which is perhaps, whatever. I
think when you were in Brazil, when you visited the farm in Brazil, I think I remember seeing lots of pictures of water-washed coffee.
Yep. They have a lot of water available, and that makes sense.
And there was a lot of
this
water
method.
Processing and all that kind of stuff, yeah.
But they're known; those water ones are known for clarity, for cleanliness, and therefore their mouthfeel is not such a highlighted thing as generalization. Again, you can get
generalization, and that's the weight, not necessarily the taste.
Exactly,
it's the weight.
It's the weight. You've got naturals, which are the opposite end of the spectrum, and lot less or no water involved in naturals. It's plucked off the tree, it's dried, and because the sun comes out and its own juices in the sun go into the seed itself, typically they have more body. Just again, generalization, because there's no water to take stuff away and clean any solids away from that particular coffee bean.
Well, I mean, that's just that right there. Again, it's generalization. It's not always going to be true. Different coffees will be outliers in those results. But basically what we can, what we can figure out is, if you're in the store looking at coffees and a bag of coffee tells you the process that it went through, whether it was washed or whether it was dry, you can kind of take a look and say, do you want it washed or natural? And if you can get a better chance of getting body going with that natural as opposed to the wash. Not always true, but it's something you can use as a rule of thumb.
The trick there, of course, is you get a big variation in flavor.
Right.
And a lot of the naturals, like I think of the Ethiopian naturals, are very berry front, very lots of body, but very berry. Whereas you go for an Ethiopian, a washed one, like a berry, like a blackberry, whatever taste, blueberry. But you can go for a washed one, and they're more the citrus, but they have a lot less body with them.
Yeah.
And so you're getting a very different citrus versus to a berry fruit. That's a different taste, but they've got different bodies going on too.
This is a curiosity of mine, but do you ever see a blend that has, so let's say it's a Brazilian coffee, but it's the same exact Brazilian coffee from the same farm, one that's natural process and one that's washed. And then, so, theoretically, we have more body in the natural one, less in the washed one, but there may be different flavors. If we combine the two of those, do we get just a double whammy of awesome?
I don't want to burst your bubble here, but typically, I think the balance is going to be off. And when I say the balance, not just, the body maybe you may get in the middle there, but I think the flavor is going to be so similar. Yeah. That flavor part and the acidity is going to be one thing as well, and it's just going to. I don't think you'll be that happy at the end of the day. It's possible and technically, and I'm sure people do it, but that's why you'll use different beans typically to bring in a body and a flavor that complements rather than two exact same flavors, just sort of a little going over the top at that point. But I'm sure there's ones out there that taste really good, and people can let us know.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's just amazing. Before we even get the beans into the roaster,
Yes.
there's certain processes and things that have been done, even just regions that have been grown in, soils, amount of sun, whether or not there was a monsoon that year.
Yeah, that's right.
That are affecting it and basically giving us these tools or this toolkit of like, here's what I have to work with that we don't get to change. And so that's when, tasting what coffee you're getting from your supplier is so important. Because year to year, it's going to change.
Yeah, it's true.
If you want new coffee, you're going to have to taste all that.
I was talking to someone at work the other day about how, it's a long-term, for a farmer, they know about it, and the roaster, it's a fairly long-term process.
Yeah.
It's not quick, whereas a barista, you make the coffee, it's done, it's over, boom, oh, you want this one? Here's this one here now, don't. Whereas it gets slower and slower as you go back in the process from the barista to the roaster to the farm. Now the farmer's got one crop for the year.
Right.
He's going to look after that for a long time.
Well, and we may be getting in the weeds a little, but I think it's interesting how you as a roaster, do you feel like over the course of, 10, 15 years, you have a better understanding of the way coffees tend to taste and the way that obviously they tend to taste, yes, because you've been tasting them a lot more, but year to year, you can kind of see patterns in different regions and that kind of thing that help make your decisions when you're looking for stuff like body.
It's a bit of a yes and a no to that because yes, your experience helps immensely and you sort of have a feel where this may go. But as I was saying earlier, jumps in how they're producing coffees and new techniques they're using on the farms and the one we talk about here shortly, the honey and the pulp naturals. They can change things up so that your experience goes, oh, that's different to what I was expecting.
Yeah.
So that's where for a roaster you got it's not just doing it day in, day out. There's an art to it as well where you actually think about, ooh, this is changing it. The latest thing in roasting really is the whole roast development. In my day, we didn't even know about that. It was just, was it light or dark, basically?
Yeah.
Or was it dark or darker? In my day. But now there's a whole study coming out in roast development, and that changes up even how that whatever bean, the Brazil bean that you've had for years, you can tweak that now to make it, oh, that's quite different to how I remember roasting it in the past.
And I want to jump into that, but I want to really quickly get the honey pulps and naturals.
Yeah, I really, they're sort of like in between the wet and the dry or the natural.
Yeah.
And they're
a little bit of a hybrid.
They are, and I think they bring out the best of both worlds, possibly, but that's my personal opinion. But the mucilage, when you pick the cherry off the tree, it's got a skin that gets taken off for wet processing, and then they get rid of that sticky mucilage. But for honey processes, they take the skin off, but they leave the mucilage on, and they put it on the drying patios, the raised beds of coffee, and they let that mucilage sort of do the work, whereas the wet process, they've taken it off, so there's no mucilage to do anything. The dry process, all of it stayed there in the skin, like a vacuum, and it's just in there, and it's incubated in there. Whereas the naturals, it's the semi-pulped, honey, I should say, they do a bit of both, and then you get different colors depending on how long you leave it in the sun, how much shade you give this coffee.
Wow!
And you can get right down. I don't know if the colors red, blue, ends in a black coffee, which is a term for it's been left the longest, and so the mucilage is really soaked in quite a bit.
I mean, that's crazy how many different, just even in just the drying and what you do with that.
And that affects, of course, what we're really back to what we're talking about. The body is that syrupiness, just the word syrup.
You think of body.
You think of body. You think of honey. You think, it's not just this watery thing. It's got a syrup that's doing stuff to the bean and bringing out the body if it's there.
Yeah, that's amazing. So the next step is the next thing that we can do to try to, or one of the next things is brew methods. Yeah. And like we had talked about, we had put on our show notes, we put a couple of the things. We put AeroPress, French press, espresso, Chemex. And when we looked at the AeroPress one, we said that the paper filters, we said AeroPress would give you more body. And when you buy an AeroPress, you get paper filters with it. You can buy metal ones from Cone, but it comes with paper. So assuming that's what they meant, we thought, okay, so it's saying you get more body through a paper, and then later on in our notes we had some stuff.
less body.
Less body. You're right. And then in our notes later on, we had some stuff that said, obviously the paper is going to soak up some of the oils and not let that pass. So it's going to give you less body. So we thought, Well, how does that work if the AeroPress gives you more body but uses a paper filter? So that's where we made the 2 cups today. So we had paper, or this one's paper, and this one's metal.
Yep.
Just to taste it. And both had a decent amount of body to them, I would say.
Which perhaps that's the way the AeroPress, how the method is used, that it just helps with the body.
It also depends on the coffee we had.
True.
But the same coffee is what we put through both processes to see. And the body, to me at least, the body was very similar.
It was actually, and it had a good body. If you're doing a scale 6 to 10, I would say there's a good 8, the 8.5. I would give that for body.
And I've always been impressed with, AeroPress. I personally don't understand the science behind it, but I've always found that AeroPress has a really good body note to it.
It does.
So, that's our first one, is AeroPress.
Yes.
And then French press. We can also get some extra body with that.
That's right. And it's where we talk about the metal filter in the French press that allows body to go through. Of course, you'll know if you ever make a French press what's left, and there's all the
insolubles.
Thank you. And that is actually gets in your cup and you drink it. You'll notice at the end of a cup of French press, you'll notice sludge. That those insolubles are still there. But that's adding body to the coffee.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can even see it as you before you press it down. You can see how much is floating in that coffee when you press it down. The filter in that, to me at least, is not as fine as a paper filter is. Like the metal filter of a French press. It's not as fine as the paper filter on something else might be. So it is going to, like you said, let more through, and it's not going to necessarily soak in at all.
Yeah,
like a paper filter would.
Exactly. I thought we did the cone, the KONE. We've done it for an AeroPress, and I've got one for a pour over as well. I've never seen a cone for a French press. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
Well, French press kind of uses a metal filter already.
But a cone's got just the pattern of holes that they've put in that stainless steel. Don't worry about it. They're just a thought.
If anyone listening works for Cone, let us know if that's something you can do.
And then another well-known one is espresso.
Let's take a moment for that.
And we'll silence there. And that's known, and again, that extraction, the way the water comes through quickly, through the fineness of, and it's a very fine blend, of course, that you've ground,
right?
And that tends to bring out some good body. The nice thing about espresso, the method there also can bring out, if it's got acidity, it would be there too. So now you get this great balance going on between the two.
And I would say there's a little bit of a correlation between AeroPress and espresso. Obviously, they're vastly different, but they're of the other methods, Chemex, French press, AeroPress has the most pressure behind it.
Exactly.
Obviously, espresso has a lot more pressure, but there's that aspect that's common to both of them. The last one is the Chemex.
I just use that as a comparison. And Chemex is typically going to have, if anything, it's going to have less oil. And here's the paper, the metal thing coming through again.
Well, because that paper filter for a Chemex is very thick.
It is.
It's in on one side it's folded 4 times, and the other side
trifold.
So there's a very thick amount of paper that it's going through. And I think of like oils, like I think of like car oil. How do you soak it up? Well, you get an absorbent rag and soak it up, and then it doesn't leave the rag. Even if you get oil in your clothes or something, or if cooking you get oil on your clothes, it stains because it soaks into your clothes.
Whereas if you cleaned up oil with one of those wire things you use for scrubbing pots and pans, it would go everywhere.
It wouldn't. It would seep through your wire sponge.
That's right. No experiment needed there because
steel cloth. That's what I'm thinking of.
Okay, it's not going to work.
So those are some different examples of different ways, even just the brewing side of it. I think to me it feels like as you go from farm to cup, the farm has a lot of say, and then almost each step as you go down, you're narrowing the amount you can change it.
That's probably true. Yeah, because
if our brewing methods are going to be different, but the biggest factor is going to be the farmer, and then the roaster, then the brew and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting.
And
how
we
that
probably
works.
should touch on the roaster.
You had mentioned a little bit about the roasting.
As you were saying, the farm has a big impact on the actual seed they start with, has a huge impact on it.
Totally.
And as a roaster, we have an opportunity to tweak it as well if it's there. And typically you would think of darker roasts are often associated with more body, but it's not always the case. As I was talking about roast development.
There's more to it than just the color.
Exactly. And when you get a dark bean, roasted dark bean, and you can see all the oil coming out, well, that's obvious.
Yeah.
But it's not as obvious as that. There's science out there that would go to show that there's a lot of factors.
Yeah, well, you had a good quote from, was it Matt Perger?
That's right. Barista Hustle.
I'm reading it off the notes, so I'm cheating.
Okay. I don't know Matt either, but he had a good quote. And,
good quote, Matt.
Bean color and roast development are not always connected. Roasting is a complex combination of multiple factors, and good roasters will control the heat all the way through the roast to accentuate their desired profiles. And that accentuate all through the roast to reach desired profiles, that's the tweak that the roaster can make. He can make it longer. There's some science out there talks about if you prolong the first crack in coffee, that will allow for more body in the coffee to develop.
Interesting. Yeah. I think it's kind of like that misconception that darker or coffee has more caffeine.
Right.
There's more to it than just getting to the color part of it. There's a process, and there's how long you make that process with heat and temperature and all that kind of stuff.
It's been great in the last 5 years of different folk who are starting to do it. I didn't see too much. There wasn't a lot of written material out there on particularly the roasting side. Another one, I have a book, Modulating the Flavor Profile of Coffee by Rob Hughes, and he explains the Maillard reaction, which I remember at school thinking, how boring. Now I go, the Maillard, that's in everything. It's an amazing process, and it's so amazing. I don't understand much of it. It's so amazing. But he looked at stretching out the roast there, that stretches out that whole reaction that's in a lot of the roasting process.
Right.
And it can lead to more what's he got here? To melanoidins. Melanoidins, I'm not sure how to say that word actually, but that's the body part, one part of the coffee that, because you've stretched that bit out, you've made a longer roast. You may get to the same color, but you've tweaked it so that now you've got more body in your coffee. But I know there's a term in roasting we call baking, which is not a term you want. You don't want coffee that's been baked, and really baked, as the word sounds like, you've just stretched out it too long, and now it's dried out, and things have not gone well in the roast because it's now a very blah coffee.
We talked about before we recorded about baking, and one of the definitions or kind of ways to think about it we came up with was a marshmallow. If you roast a marshmallow, because it's got the word roast in it. If you roast a marshmallow, it'll cook in 2 minutes or depending on how patient.
In your case, 1. Yeah.
In my case, 1 minute or less. But if you put a marshmallow in the oven at a low temperature for a long amount of time, it'll just expand and expand. As long as you don't burn it, you can make it grow. But it's not a roasted marshmallow at that point. The
sweetness goes, the body goes from it, and suddenly, you've got a baked marshmallow.
And that's what we do with coffee. If we prolong that for too long, if we don't have high enough temperature, we can cause those things. So it is a balance when you're doing that to make sure you do it, but also not overdo it.
Yeah. So, I mean, we could go on. I could learn, and you could learn more about body, and not that I want to get focused just on body, because there's many other parameters there. We want to look at acidity shortly too, not today, but another time. But my realization in all this, and when I started roasting coffee, when I started cupping coffee, I realized one thing, 3 words: I need to use my tongue. I'm not talking about talking, because I sometimes do that too much. Sometimes I don't do enough of it. But start using your tongue when you're drinking coffee, and just weigh the coffee, and you will be surprised that I think this is why I like this coffee, because it's really heavy. I've never thought about that before. And body is in or it's not in the coffee, and you will notice it by using your tongue. Yeah,
I think that's a super important thing. And I think, if anything, just think about it. That's kind of been our whole thing throughout these last cupping episodes, is to think about it. And thinking about the body, you can do that. To get the body of a coffee, it's best to do it black, so you don't want to do it with milk. That's going to affect it, all those things. But
we didn't say, I may have said it, but also use your tongue for weighing, but then get your tongue on top of your mouth and just pull it back and you will see that smoothness we're talking about, whether it's really grainy or it's really heavy, but it's smooth. And that's sort of when you're tasting coffee, you want to use the tongue and the roof of your mouth.
Yeah. So, I mean, with those tools, that's something you can start to look at and look for, especially when you're cupping, and even just drinking different coffees if you're at work or if you're going out for coffee, you can start to kind of assess that a little bit more. And it's something that can really give you a lot more in your cup, or if you don't like body, something that can ruin your cup.
Yeah.
But it is a huge important aspect of it, and we look forward to kind of going into a few more aspects of cupping. But again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a part of the Bean Stuff podcast. But so we look forward to chatting with you next week, and we'll see you soon.